This is a virtual reading of Conspirators, To Each His Own Agenda by Mag Gupta.
Chapter 15. The Victory Road. The fighting continued. They were outflanked completely. The forces of the kingdom had been pushed back to the base of the hill. Falthor had ordered the third line of the spearmen to join the first, elongating the battle line. For a moment, the pirates were very slightly outflanked, but it didn't last. The cavalry were charging the back line of the pirates. The knights were following Tiberius. Their lances had been broken with repeated impacts, and they were fighting with swords. Gilorn was running out of arrows. He'd placed the last of them into the ground. He was standing alone on the top of the hill. It made him a target for the archers of the pirates, but their aim was worse than a child's. Nevertheless, he did have to dodge many shots. He grabbed his last arrow and aimed well. He loosed, feeling the shaft leave his bow slower than any arrow he had loosed before. The arrow flew through the air, straight and true. It caught a thin man, with hair longer than he was tall. It caught him in the chest, and he fell backwards, onto another. His death sent an echo that seemed to run across the pirates. All of the ones who weren't fighting turned to see the long-haired man fall. Some of the pirates turned and fled at the sight of it, but it was a small number. The ones who were left had been thrown into a fury and were fighting that much harder. As the flanks of Falthor's forces collapsed, the knights attempted to outflank the pirates, but it was not enough. They were trapped. It was too late to retreat now. Right at that moment, as if it was a deliverance from the gods, a loud horn blast echoed from behind a hill. A high-pitched, piercing blow that rang 3 times, and then nearly 50 Greek companion knights, clad in the deep blue armor of the sea, rode over the hill. They represented a wall of bronze, the light shining off the armor and blood-red helmet plumes of both man and beast. The knights crashed into the exposed flanks of the pirates and were quickly followed by men with massive bronze shields and long spears. The raiders were exhausted now, and the charge tore straight through the lines. Lances, swords, even shield blows. They broke through as soon as they hit, and after a full minute of charging, they had broken the pirate forces trapping the horseland knights. Together, they wheeled and charged right into the quickly compacting lines of the pirates. The entire force was now in flight. The knights rode after them, but one stayed to watch the shield wall slay the last of the raiders who had stayed. Falthor straightened up, letting his sword fall point down. He looked up at the knight, recognizing the armor and the emblem on his cloak. The knight recognized him as well and raised his visor, revealing a boy barely 16, but standing taller than most other men. "Afternoon, Uncle," Julius, son of Alistair, said, smiling. Although Julius wasn't related to Falthor, his father's bond to him had let him call him Uncle before he'd even met him. "Lord Julius," Falthor panted, breathing deeply in relief. "You have fortuitous timing." "Indeed," Julius smiled. He turned to look at the knights cutting down the stragglers. "Tend to your wounded," he nodded. "We will return to escort you." Falthor nodded, sheathing his sword. Julius nodded back, slammed his visor down, and then rode his horse after the knights. "Richard!" "I'm here," Richard called. He was sitting on a pile of corpses next to Turgon. "Where is Tiberius?" "Over there," Gilorn pointed with his bow. The prince was indistinguishable among the other riders. Tiberius seemed to know they were talking about him, and rode over with his remaining king's guard. "Father," he greeted weakly, his chin and cheeks smeared with blood. "It is good to see you unharmed." "And you," Richard smirked. His face fell when he took in his son's appearance. "Your armor is bent, though." It was true. Tiberius's chest plate had been caved inward by a hammer blow, and his braces were contorted and twisted. "Better my armor than me, father," he laughed, but winced. The blow had clearly done some injury. "Can you ride?" Turgon asked, concerned. "Of course I can." Tiberius spat blood. "I'm a horse master. I would gather our wounded." Richard nodded. "Be quick about it. I want that wound taken care of." Tiberius nodded to this order with a grunt and rode off to his riders. "Ranger!" Felthor shouted. Gaelorn rushed forward. He'd drawn his sword, but there was no blood on it. Many had fallen to his bow, but his swordcraft still needed work. "Yes, my lord?" he asked uncertainly. Falthor made no sign to show he was pleased or surprised to see him alive, nor made any comment on the dryness of his sword. "Walk with me," he ordered. "You too, Turgon." Turgon sighed, got up and picked out his sword from the wrist of a pirate. Richard seemed distraught by his departure as well, but he pulled out a wine sack and hung it on his axe, which was deeply embedded in the back of a rather fat pirate bosun, an officer who exacted discipline. His whip, which was normally used to discipline mutinous sailors, lay 3 feet away, still in the hand of the dead man. They walked past the piles of many more dead pirates to Ilsefield, the stench of blood and bowels fresh and roasting in the sun. They continued walking, squelching through the broken and blood-soaked earth, until they came to the long-haired man that Gaelorn had shot with his last arrow. They looked down at him, his hair washing out from under him in the pool of his blood. He was still on top of the other. Turgon sighed. "Ah, well." He pulled out his sword. "All in a day's work." "He's dead, though," Gaelorn said. "Yes, he is," Turgon smiled. He stabbed his sword through the dead man's mouth, and the man underneath screamed out in pain. "How did you know to do that?" Gaelorn asked. "The fool decided to tense his hand over his knife," Turgon explained. "It's a nice knife, though." He hacked the hand from the dead body. He took the knife and fitted it into his belt, tossing the hand over his shoulder. "Besides," he stabbed another man to no effect, "you want to make sure these fuckers are good and dead. Many of them can be a bugger to kill." He signaled to an officer who, with 3 legionaries, started slitting the wrists of each corpse before them. "Do you know who this is?" Felthor asked, ignoring what had just happened. "No," Gaelorn shook his head. "I don't know anyone from these lands." "This is a fleet master of Gladium," Felthor said. "These men are the admiralty of that cursed realm. They only cut their hair when they lose their capital ship. This man obviously has not lost a battle in many a year. Add that to your list of Kingslayer feats," the only surviving Citadel guardsman laughed. "You're really pissing on the men of the south, aren't you?" Gaelorn laughed reluctantly. "Maybe we should cut his hair then." Falthor had not considered this. "Yes, we should. It would make an ideal wedding gift to Alistair. A man such as this would give the land much reprieve with his death." Turgon hawked spit and hacked his hair off with his newly acquired knife. "Let us rejoin the others," Falthor commanded. "Have the hair washed and put it in a glass jar." Julius returned within the hour. Only one of his knights had fallen. His body was slung over his horse that was being led by another knight. He chuckled at the sight of Richard drinking. "You horse lords and your drink." "You cannot have one without the other," Richard grunted. He belched and stood up. "What brings you all the way up here?" "Your party, sire. We are patrolling the coast," Julius smiled, sitting straight in the saddle. It was here that he was his father incarnate. They had the same eyes, hair, and shaped head. While Alistair was noticeably fair, there was something about Julius that made him look more so, with a fitness that can only come from someone who worked hard every day. We've been tracking the fleet for nearly a week, waiting for when they would disembark to raid. This was no raiding party, Falthor clarified. When have the Lords of Gladium been so unified? All too often nowadays, Julius shook his head. Nearly 6 ships. And a fleet master, Turgon added, holding up the jar. Julius nodded happily. My father will be pleased. He let out a shrill whistle. Let us be on our way. We can reach Ferris by sundown. He nodded to the array of bodies they had assembled. I have sent a rider to the settlement to fetch aid for the wounded. I will stay here, my lord, Falthor's physician, who had rejoined the group with the wagons, declared. My place is with the helpless. Falthor nodded. Turgon, assign men to stay with them. Yes, sir, Turgon nodded. He gave his orders, as did Julius, leaving 10 of his hoplites. Many of Richard's knights remained as well, religiously tending to the dead and wounded without any order on the matter. Gilorn was looking around the dead, feeling a twist in his stomach every time he saw a man of theirs. The smell was disgusting, and the crows were already circling above. His own horse had been taken back with the wagons, and had been quite thrilled by the break of the monotony of walking, and was trotting along quite happily. It seemed that Tiberius was right. He was riding next to a knight who had taken off his helm and hitched it onto his saddle. The knight was proud and handsome. His golden brown hair was short and grew in every direction. He was clad in what had been very well-polished plate armor of seaweed. His helm was very much like Julius's, but less ornate. It was silver, with white feather imprints, with a silver model of an owl that was in flight, etched into the crown of the helmet. Gilorn didn't know it, but this was the Swan of the Coast, a knight of middling background, but a highly celebrated one. He had earned his title in the early days of the war against the Golden King, when he had been a simple garrison commander of a fort so insignificant it didn't have a name. His general was laying siege to a fortress that lay on the southern side of the river, and had sent word for reinforcements. It was a simple order, but one that became highly complicated. The river crossing had been fortified by a force that dwarfed his own 5-to-1, so he organized a river crossing by ship. But on the night of the crossing, a storm hit and ruined his vessels, so he had no choice but to attack fortified positions. In a genius move, he spread his forces so thin and long that he completely surrounded the enemy and crushed them. He quickly joined forces with the general, and the city was taken. He was returned to the city and given the highest awards for gallantry and valor, along with a knighthood. The rest was rumors and gossip. The knight ignored Gilorn's presence and looked off into the distance. Knighthood in Greece was much like in Rome. It was a social concept, but it also marked a concept being an officer in the military ranks. The company continued along the road, the stench and horrors of the battle feeling far behind them. Soon they came to the lighthouse castle of Ferris. It had been razed and recently rebuilt with wood. The lighthouse itself was made of stone, but it had been ruined right down to its foundation and served little more than a raised platform to hang a lantern. The walls were manned by men in blue chainmail, each with the Athenian white owl and olive branch on their chests. The clank of stonework welcomed them as they passed a singular man and a boy hammering away at a large boulder by the road. These guards all seemed to be grateful for Julius's return. They proceeded through the gate and into the main courtyard. It wasn't nearly half as large as Ilsefield. Gilor noticed that most, if not all, of the knights around them were elderly warriors. Falthor seemed to notice as well, and Julius read it in his eyes. "It may not be much, but it is defendable," he smiled. "How many men do you have?" Turgon asked. 300 soldiers and near 100 knights." Julius dismounted and walked over to the dead knight to help another to get him off his horse. "From here we defend the coast from the pirates. It's getting worse out there." He let out a loud grunt as he lifted the man up and carried him over to the healer. He was beyond help, but they could clean his wounds and make him presentable for his family. When he returned, "That fleet wasn't the largest we've seen. We don't know where their ships are coming from." "Do you have any ships yourself?" Falthor asked. "Only the ones that we have taken from the pirates," Julius pointed out to the sea. "Now we have 6 more." He nodded his appreciation to Falthor. "We don't really have the resources to keep them, so we'll send them to Seaward. Admiral Mistnir needs every ship he can get." "How is the old cock?" Turgon perked up at this. "Troubled and in deep peril," Julius grimaced sadly. "Our shipyards are under constant attack, and what money we have left from Ignatius's taxes are not enough to cover the costs of the fleet. We only have 20 or so ships that are half ready for war." "I didn't know it was so bad." Falthor looked around. "Your absence has been sorely noticed," nodded. It wasn't an accusation. "Ignatius's hoarding in the White City has already drained all the money he took from you. He's doubled the taxes thrice now. Unemployment and starvation are at the highest we've seen since the Golden King's first revolt." "You should have sent for me," Falthor said. They left the courtyard, which was rapidly filling up, and entered the main hall. They sat at the table. Turgon and Richard both grabbed the only roast pig and tugged at it in between them. It was hardly the feast at Ilsefield. The food was mostly fish and small hunting game. "There is little that you could have done," Julius reassured him, shooing away a servant who brought him a satchel of wine. He unfastened his cloak and tossed it to the servant instead. "If we suddenly came into coin, the steward would demand to know where it came from, and I fear you would bankrupt yourself before we could assemble something that could be useful. Our strength is our anonymity." "I will ask one thing," Tiberius grimaced through another swig of wine. "Why are you here and not in your father's city? Are you not to attend the wedding?" "I think I will," Julius nodded, "but I fear I need to stay here. We've been attacked daily and my men are exhausted. The wedding would give us time to refresh though. We need new supplies also." "Couldn't Decimus help with that?" Gilorn asked. Julius hadn't noticed him before now. He examined him for a moment. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. "My future brother-in-law only has power through my father. Until the wedding, he is no help. Once it is over, I pray that my father will be able to aid us more." "What do you need?" Falthor asked. "Soldiers, mostly." Julius's eyes suddenly became alive with seriousness. "I have many knights and commanders, but it's hoplites I need, and more men means I need a bigger castle. I need to develop the foundations here, make us more independent. We rely completely on supplies from Seaward. It's been a hard winter, but now spring is here. I hope that the farmers will arrive soon. The land here is rich and fertile. We hope to harvest enough that we can start generating some income ourselves. When the wedding is done, we plan to hire more smiths and upgrade our forges. Arlcliffe is our military might, but it's an entire coast and a mountain away." "What medical resources do you have here?" Tiberius grunted. The wine was wearing off now, and the pain was coming back. "I have my personal master of healers," Julius offered. He makes sure we have ample supplies. We have many wounded from our patrols, so he's put to good use here." "I would go see him," Tiberius grunted. He stood up, a hand on his side. "Father," he nodded to Richard. Richard frowned up at him, his mouth and hand full of pork. He sighed and stood up. "You will not be alone," he said. He swallowed loudly. He helped his son out of the hall and to the healer's quarters. Turgon watched them leave, helping himself to the rest of the pig. "We'll rest here tonight," Julius commanded. "We'll make for Seaward in the morning. Your own men will join us or rest here if they are unable." "If only we could sail," Felthor said. "They could be home before the week is out." "Indeed," Julius agreed, "but the wedding may help with that." "How so?" Turgon asked. "Aquila is in attendance," Julius smiled. "He and the steward have been in Seaward for nearly a week. My father is sending me many reports on their correspondences. He is attempting to gain support for a major offensive against the forces of Gladium. If we can add our support to this, we may be able to cleanse the land of the pirate scum." "Why would our support sway the steward?" Gilorn asked. "We are disgraced men." "Exactly," Turgon thumped his chest proudly. "Think of it, an ally and an enemy both telling him the same thing. He will have no choice to agree, else he will be seen as mad." "This is good news," Felthor nodded, "but we must act quickly." "Speed is the weapon we do not have," Julius sighed. "Less so than you think, my nephew," Felthor sighed. "We have learned of a plot against the kingdom. The commanders of the world are beginning a campaign against us. They plan to unite everyone around us. They have allies in the barbarian lands, Dragon's Keep, the South and Gladium. The kingdom will be completely surrounded. If we can break Gladium's might before the trap is sprung, we can buy time to deal with the dragon and the orcs." "Fighting vengeance against Gladium is one thing," Julius said, "but you are talking about an army to wage the war of the age. Ignatius will need more than well-positioned words to change his mind on this, which is why we need to force his hand." Julius sighed in impatience and curiosity. "What are you suggesting?"